Hello, this is Al Filreis. I'm about 8.5 blocks from the dear Kelly Writer's house, which alas is empty at the moment, but our programming is, excuse me, not empty at all. In fact, today, all day, has been what we've called Derek Day. Derek Day. Sorry, Derek, is there something really corny about that?
Yes, that's right.
Which means Derek Beaulieu has been with us all day for 3 sessions. We had a noon live interactive webcast with the ModPo community. That was great. We talked about conceptual poetry, and Derek fortunately just had some time to talk about his work and his response to a lot of others' work. It was just so fantastic. There's a recording of that available at the ModPo YouTube page channel. Then we recorded an episode of Poem Talk, which won't be out for a few months, on 2 sound poems performance pieces by BP Nichol, and we were joined by Tracy Morris and Doug Kearney. That was special. That'll be out in a few months. And tonight, Derek is going to be reading, performing his work, or maybe showing us work. Who knows what he's up to? He works in so many media for about 35 minutes or so. And then I will moderate a Q&A. I'll ask some of my own questions. And with some help from the inimitable Anthony Lagana and Rachel Dennis, who are here as part of the Kelly Writer's House staff, I will convey to Derek some of your comments and questions. And so that's what I want to say now. If you're watching us on YouTube, in fact, there's only one way to do it. You have to be watching us on YouTube. And if you're set up with your own YouTube situation, to be able to put comments into the comment stream, which would be below the video player in typical interfaces with YouTube, go ahead and type into the comment stream any comments, any reactions, any responses, and any questions. It can be trivial, it can be big. We really will enjoy any kind of ongoing comment, even during the reading. And then Rachel and Anthony will convey through our own chat here within Zoom some of the questions. And part of the Q&A for the final 25 minutes or so of the event will be my conveying to Derek some of those questions. So we do urge you to participate in this. I am so honored, Derek. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. We had hoped we'd be hanging around in Philadelphia at the Writer's House. Alas, that's not to be, but this has been a great day. I'm so honored and pleased that you have been part of the Writer's House scene today, and honored to introduce you as a poet, publisher, anthologist, promoter of arts communities, deep thinker, and activist around community and poetics and the role of the small press, founder of House Press, and of No Press, N-O space press, No Press, whose recent work has shifted to conceptual fiction, especially visual translations and rewritings, whose magnificent edition of Nights on Prose Mountain, there it is, I have it right here, Prose Mountain, the collected, is it collected? It's everything, huh? The fiction of BP Nichol, edited by Derek, put out by Coach House Press. A book that I cherish. And as I mentioned earlier today, I happened to have been in Montreal on the night that Coach House celebrated the arrival of this book a few years back, and got, in fact, Derek to sign my copy, which I cherish, as I said. Derek lives in Banff, Alberta, where he is director of literary arts at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity. And surely during the Q&A section, I'm going to add, unless he talks about it during his reading, I'm going to ask Derek about his new book, which is coming out when, Derek? Early next year?
Yep, January 2021.
Very soon. It's called Lens Flare. It's being published by Gimo Press. And it's in a sense, a page-to-page response to his previous book. So we will absolutely be asking you about that. Derek, it's very exciting for me to turn the podium over to you for a reading. Thank you in advance. I know I'm going to enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Al. I really appreciate the introduction and for hosting me. Hello, everybody, from the side of Sleeping Buffalo Mountain here in Banff National Park, Treaty 7 territory. I'm going to read a series of prose pieces, starting with a section from B.P. Nichol's Nights on Prose Mountain. I know how much Al likes the book, so I'm going to start with there and work through a series of prose. So the first piece that I'll open the reading with is from B.P. Nichol's Nights on Prose Mountain. It's a piece called Prologue, which was originally published in Craft Dinner. You turn the page, and I am here. That in itself is interesting. To me, at least, it is interesting since my existence begins as you turn the pages and begin to read me. I have no way of knowing your motives, though I know or say or assume you have opened this book hoping to learn more about me or whoever it was you hoped or did not hope to encounter in your reading. So now you have begun. You have begun reading what I am saying, and I am once again finding a beginning. I am not alive, am I? I am simply these words as they follow one another across this page, which is so white that were they not here, were I not here, you would close this book to escape the whiteness. Is that whiteness like something else? Do you see it as a void, perhaps, that is necessary for it to be filled with words before you would consider turning each page carefully to examine not the white, but the retreat from white into the black letters placed upon it, giving me my tenuous existence? I am aware of the white. I am aware of the white as I find meaning through your eyes. When you are not here reading, I am aware of nothing. I can make no statement about that. My only awareness is now as you read this. I am aware of the white only as an absence of awareness, a gap between words as you read me. I have only your perception of me, of what I am, words and letters, a movement which is simply the turning of pages. Perhaps you comfort yourself thinking somebody wrote this. It does not matter. That person is dead or not dead. That person is not part of me. At this moment, there is only you and me. We are one. You decide where my existence begins and ends. I am the same now as when that person wrote me down. I can change only if you change me. Would I like to change? It does not matter. I would not be aware of the change. There is nothing I can or cannot like. I am always the same. There is only you and me. We are all there at this moment. When you close this book, I will be waiting. Always, I am waiting. Even now, as I am being in you, there is a part of me waiting. I wait with no consciousness of waiting. If you pick me up and read me, I am. If you don't, I'm not. Always, I am waiting. If I had a consciousness, my consciousness would be of waiting without pain. I am waiting without consciousness of waiting. If you never pick me up, I will be waiting. You will pick me up. You will be different. Another part of me will still be waiting. Someday all my parts will be picked up at once and begun, and there will still be parts of me waiting. Always, I am waiting. Somewhere, I am waiting. Waiting without consciousness of waiting. Waiting. So that's a short excerpt from B.P. Nichol's prologue, a bit of a palate cleanser to get us going. The rest of the pieces this evening are all, as I said, all going to be prose, very much influenced by my editing of B.P. Nichol's Nights on Prose Mountain, which collected his 4 novels and 2 collections of short stories, as well as reading through his work led me very much to return to the prose of Gertrude Stein. So both of those voices definitely echo through the work I'm going to engage with this evening. The second piece starts as a visual and then continues on as a piece of text. So I'm going to reach over my shoulder and share this. As you can see, skittering down the page is Guillaume Apollinaire's Il Pleut. This was a piece that I created in conjunction with Natalie Check, the German photographer and writer, who uncannily finds existing text within other people's work. She finds amazing incidences of whole poems found inside of newspaper articles. But in this particular case, she approached a series of writers around the world and said, here is Apollinaire's Il Pleut, all the letters running down the page as a series of rivulets. Now what I would like you to do is create a text that keeps all those letters where they are and create a piece of prose that surrounds it. So imagine this being the fossil. Now you write the slate so that all those letters remain where they are in terms of the original poem, and you create a new piece of prose that goes from margin to margin, top to bottom, that embraces and holds those letters where they exist. The piece I created is called Il Pleut, and it seemed appropriate to read it as November 9th, 2 days ago, at 6 o'clock in the evening, was the 102nd anniversary of the death of Guillaume Apollinaire. He died after being injured in the head in the First World War, and then eventually died of illness 2 days before the armistice. And his final moments were hearing the crowd riot up and down the streets of Paris, calling for the overthrow of King Wilhelm of Germany. Now, of course, Wilhelm in French is Guillaume, so the crowd was actually yelling, "Down with Guillaume!" as Guillaume is breathing his last breaths. So this is Il Pleut. Poets writhe and skitter their etched glyphs across a miasmic void. A writing of ached poetic avers letters as needed, a soft scream of an alien relic element that cynics dismiss as unneeded and dated. A contemporary easel for a wry errato which rejects words, nothing but the petulant act of a crying, ugly, under-realized opportunity for an atonal screech. This poetry entreats the poet to reject letters and use an eerie, vexed visual sabotage to express a new language of signs, an abused scrap of relics and neon. The fluorescent remnants scattered along tempered Duchampian sheets of transparent glass, each mote of dust finely embossed in uneasy indigo. The linguistic rubble that poets deem contemporary arrests late millennium lyricism in favor of a poetic exploration agitating the broken phonemes into brick-worked sentences. Ulcerate text, purge emotion and narration, and instead accept symbols' odes to italics, Roman, and bold as the start of a new verse. Alephi's now glow alien. They highlight the Tokyo skyscape, coloring in silent scraps, unraveling tendrils of text. Each poetic inscription is an elated astral beacon signaling a dead product. Lexicons beg, quiver, bead-like. Atoms recombine, adrift in the neon narration of nebulae, erased stenographers of poetic detritus. Abandoned dictionaries in the ether, alter linguistic expectations to include the asteroid lashes singing noise in the void. Listen to the digital alphabet fracture and pulse, esoteric icons narrating the regret and dismay of electronic telephones. Texts erasing their reference are maniacally maimed, scattered, and with no architecture. Like puzzles fractured mercilessly, austere pieces query Cuneau's workshop for poems created exactly. Stolen trinkets outlawfully liberated. Poetic embrace of slogans, logos, and ideograms get internet-savvy users a poetry written in this mashup nanosecond. Every splintered image promotes concrete poems, evanescent epaulets set to glint and gleam upon the barons of dying armies. Exotic jewels elegize the rubble of crumbling media. These verboten belches of indigestible letters eulogize chrome logos. Abject eruptions write bored hymns to apples and swooshes, empires and kisses. Each a decree reading poetry in pointing, sublimity in sigils. Abrased images abstract into elegant poesie und constellations, a light in flat screen radiance. Neugrande's dreams of idealist literature launches series of voco-visual attempts to write broadly brutal poems. Aesthetic knots of letters most resemble reimagined prisms and not literature. Now, with Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and ebooks, narratives with elegant pixels crowd our email inboxes. These alluring digital conundrums teeter between the culinary and the supermarket, between poetry and product placement. Surrounding our commutes and launching our desires, branding is our Esperanto. Abject, lost, this environment of ennui must give the poet pause. Ad men beat poets, designers undo writers. Poets must strive to write abject, taciturn trademarks for oniric businesses. Each abstract neo-logo twists and decays the supposed poetic qualities inherent in contemporary ads. Database applets and wiki scraping access bodies of texts. Abundant ballads squawk from stock reports, abandon poetry, produce unproductive widgets of text. Each screw and bolt fastens letters, building a new vocabulary. The calligram cries over poetry's body. Guillaume embraces each weep and wail, each murmur and moan. His writing moves poetry onto the gallery walls, a dry, void, pallid page written in lettreset. Oily smears of old advertising heave serifs. Adverts, the wreckage casting shadow across the corpse of poetry, demand the ululations of writers include appeals to PC and Mac. The rivulets rain down the page. The letters squeak, streak, and gather. Cascading letters bubble and froth. They gibber and squeak. Storm clouds blacken and strafe the page. The poems memorialize invasions and stalemates. Abba Guillaume, each letter howls in grief. When earth herself can no longer suffer the lamentable whimpers of poets, the squawk of signs and names, the notices and sirens. The poem veils the newspaper, every article a grip of flowering wounds. Inside each letter nestles a bullet, a lit grenade about to unfurl in splinters of stems, bars, and baselines. Apollinaire's bandages conceal the surrealist birthplace of the modern century. That wound released a writing free from linearity, freed from syntax. The author bleeds, oozing across the page, thousands of injuries each article, unwinding a white bandage onto a new page. Each slogan and text, every headline and email unfurls the bandages. Literature flickers on the blue glistening screen as pixels pour and streak. Digital glyphs adrift in raining cascades. These bandages flutter aimlessly, agonizingly revealing the scabs and clots. Atrophying text tumbles, trickles, pools, and stains. Poetry is an absurd act of cultural tediousness. Teeming tweets and swaying gifs virtually erase poetry. Placating smudges and smears replace the poem. Concrete slogans and animated ads push poetry to absorb new techniques and new material. Instead of inspiration, poets become machines who embrace the sheer amount of quotidian language. Apollinaire's droplets streak an eerie conceptual path on the looking glass of literature. The baubles each reflect in uncanny distortion the slogans and logos which haunt our dreams. Once again, that was Beaulieu, a collaboration with Natalie Check. The rhythms of Stein, as well as a particular quote from Guillaume Apollinaire, also led me to a long autobiographical poem called Extespicium. Extespicium engages with memory, family, grief, and trauma, and starts with a quote from Guillaume Apollinaire, and that quote is, "What is true is never interesting." She was pregnant when she was 4 months pregnant, 3 months pregnant when she was 7 months pregnant, and not pregnant at all when she was 7 months pregnant, but what did she know? Out and out, then out and in, she and him. I was born in the Montreal Jewish Hospital and later at the Montreal General Hospital. I am neither Jewish nor a general. I remember it this way. Generally, I was born partially at the Montreal Jewish Hospital. The remainder was later. A purple used since antiquity as the mark of wealth and lavish opulence. I remember something happening, did it? Did something happen? I remember it. I remember it. Did it happen? Something happens. I remember it. It happened, and she remembers. He remembers. She remembers. She remembers, so does he. I was born in Montreal. I was born in Montreal or Montreal. I was born in Montreal or Montreal or Brossard or Longueuil. When I was born in Brossard, but then I was born in Longueuil. Now I was born in Brossard again, but I wasn't born there. I was born in Montreal or Montreal, but we lived in Brossard. I was born in Montreal or Montreal, but once I lived, I was born in Brossard. Brossard was itself, and then it was Longueuil, and then it was itself again. But the whole time it was part of Montreal or Montreal. I was born in Montreal. Brossard has no cemetery. I was born at the Montreal Jewish General Hospital and later at the Montreal Children's Hospital, which was appropriate as I was a child. They remember it this way. Once out, taken further out. Down the street, they took me. They came in early, but it was time, and then they took me. I was a child, though I am not currently a child. That depends. One can be a child and grow and still be a child, grow additionally and continue to be a child. Even when that one is no longer a child, one is still someone's child, just as that someone is another's. Being a child and being a child is different. I was a child when I was taken down the street. I was taken down the street by someone. I was with them, and they were with a child, though not with child. A purple obtained drop by drop, squeezed from mollusks found along eastern Mediterranean shores. Spurred on by intestine, they had to wait for him to decide what to leave in and what to remove, having already decided to remove me. Men don't have friends. Men work. If Montreal, then Calgary. A 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, a deal. Then Montreal, then Calgary. A deal is a deal. He was born there, murmuring on the way. He was born there 3 or 4 years later and 2 months later. I was brought to yellow up the stairs. It was yellow, and on the right, a moment, yellow. The sun shone a spot on the wall, right blue. 3 stockings on the banister, the photograph, the room was on the left, the blue, the photograph, insists the spot was on the wall. Green Lane, Greenfields, Greenfield Park, South Shore, West Island. He was silver, and either he was at one side incessantly, or one never saw him. It depended on him. Half a year in a box, half a year under the bed. She's chasing marbles. He chased a silk ball, and so does she. I looked out of doors. I am nothing new. He will be anxious to leave. Uncontained, I had to be gathered up like a campsite, like a tent. I was supposed to be born on my birthday. Instead, he was. Murmuring on the way, he was born on my birthday. I was 3 years or 4 years earlier and 2 months early. To gather up like a tent takes 24 hours. That's for what fits back in the bag, what is best not brought home. As long as his hand to his watch band, a ruler his watch. 17 hours of graph paper and a blue pen down and down and up. It must be true if it's written down, security in a graph paper. That was the way he remembered it. You should arrange for the last rites, he said. I can't do that. No, I can't do that, he said. Would you rather I made the arrangements, he said. You had better, he said. I can't do that, he said. He and him, the two of them talking. Another 4 hours for a little box and a chicken. An operating room at a hospital, a dining room at home. Stuffed and stuffing. What gets carved and what gets put back together again, giblets. Gathered up like a campsite, stuffed like a turkey, Merry Christmas in a tube. Do this procedure in the unit. Sim 24, all well, the blue marble. That was published as a chapbook, Codex Despicium, by Stuart Ross's press, Proper Tales Press. Stuart Ross is a hero of the small press scene in Canada, having published dozens and dozens of small press editions by authors around the country. From my second book of nonfiction, The Unbearable Contact with Poets, once again starts with a quotation from Apollinaire. And that quotation, which I also manipulated to include in Il Clou, is, "The earth itself can no longer suffer the unbearable contact with poets." I have a piece here that was commissioned to write by Tony Trehe for the Bury Text Festival in 2011. It's called A Box of Nothing, and starts with a quote from John Cage. "Clearly, we are beginning to get nowhere." John Cage. On April 7th, 2011, I sent the Barrie Museum and Archives an empty box. I purchased the box for $5 and received skeptical looks from the UPS employees when I requested to send the box devoid of any content to Barrie, England. UPS also instructed me that they would not ship an empty box and that they needed the contents of the box to fit within one of their predetermined categories. We agreed to enclose within the box a single sheet of blank paper. With this content, as unwritten as it was, UPS could now categorize the contents of the box as, quote, documents, and could continue to process the application for transportation. Their consternation was compounded with my request to insure the box and its contents to a value of $52,000, roughly the same measly amount as the yearly wage of an arts worker in the UK. UPS, not unexpectedly, would only insure the parcel for $3,000, and even then at a fee that was beyond affordability. In effect, they would not guarantee the safety of a box of nothing and refused to insure the safety of, quote, artwork, even an empty box. For insurance of the amount I requested, I would have to seek a rider from an independent insurance provider. I was then asked to complete a parcel shipping order form that included the checkboxes that inquired, are the contents of the parcel breakable? Yes. And are the contents of the parcel replaceable? No. Upon my completion of the form, I was invoiced a shipping cost of $175, and the box was assigned a tracking number and a series of barcodes and QR codes to expedite the box of absolutely nothing, as it cleared various processing centers in Canadian and British customs. Those barcodes and QR codes were included in the Barrie Museum and Archives exhibition, The History of Trade Stamps. Trade stamps were the hand-printed labels that the cotton industry used to indicate the contents of their shipping bundles in order to appeal to their often illiterate purchasers. The trade stamps often depicted scenes, emblems, animals, or figures, and the industry employed hundreds of designers to create these trademarks as an early form of branding. The resultant barcodes and QR codes are the symbol of nothing. In light of the current UK administration's draconian cutbacks and their lack of willingness to ensure the growth of social programs in the arts, John Cage's aphorism, nothing more than nothing may be said, seems highly apt. "2017 brought the publication of my 400-page novel, A Novel, published in Paris by Jean Boite Editions. A Novel takes its inspiration and all of its content from Andy Warhol's novel of exactly the same name. In 1968, Warhol published A Novel, which was close to 400 pages of transcriptions of conversations that Ondine, one of the denizens of Warhol's factory, had over a series of weekends over a couple years. Warhol took the tapes, the audio tapes of those recordings, gave them to a series of high school students and asked them to transcribe exactly what they heard. He then took the transcripts, published them largely without edits, compiled them into a manuscript, and they were published by Grove, which is this. So there is no plot, there's no setting, there's no anything that makes a novel, except dialogue, or it would seem. As you read Warhol's novel, this eminently unreadable novel, interspersed throughout the text are sound effects and commentary of the oral soundscape that these transcribers could hear behind the words. So what they ended up doing, what these high school students did, all young women, they would transcribe what they heard in terms of the dialogue, but then they would also transcribe in their own way of the sounds of the city. The sounds of New York City, 1968. What I did is, having read Warhol's book, I scanned every page into the computer, and then using my erase function, my little tools within Paint and Photoshop, I deleted all of the text except the punctuation marks, those traffic signs of literature, which then ideally suggested the grid of Manhattan streets, and all the sound effects, all of the sounds of the city, therefore asserting the voices of these young women as they transcribed the texts of Robert Undine and his friends. I'm going to start reading from a novel for a few minutes. I'm going to start with Warhol's text and then fade into a novel. Chapter 1, Part 1. Rattle, gurgle, clink, tickle, tinkle. Click, pause, click, ring, dial, dial. Undine, you said that dial, that if you pick up the mayor's voice on the other end, dial, pause, dial, 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 the mayor's sister would know us. Beep, busy, busy, busy. Drella, we should start for the park, right? Okay. Coin drops. Money jingles as coins return. Car noises in background. You're a clunk. Are there any way stations on the way we have to get to? Like I was what? Noise. If we go through, if we go through the park, is there any place we can keep calling? Right through the phone call, is there any place where we can call him if we answering service? Are you cars honking, blasting? Are there different places? Are there different places where we can call your answer? Oh, want some cake? Nah, a little juice, anything? I know where we can get some. Hurriedly. Oh yes, let's get some. Fantastic, baby. Yeah, good. Oh, you can't pretend that you're not here. Oh, okay, all right. You're all right, you're here. Okay, I get it. I know, you're here. Yeah. Washed out noises. Pause. High-pitched honk. Honk. Pause. Honk. Music. Opera and laughter. Opera. Opera. Laughter. Laughter. Opera. Pause. 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 Long pause. Long pause and banging. Pause. Pause. Door opens. Pause. Phone rings. Pause. Laughter. Banging noise on door. Coughing. Music. Music. Slow and drawly. Music. 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 Pause. Music. Laughter. Laughter. Singing. Singing. Coughing. Something indistinctly in Italian. Car noises. Pause. Noises and voices in background. Pause. 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 Singing in background. Plop. Pause. Long pause. Voice in background. Opera. Opera. Voices. Opera. Opera is very loud. Hoarse. Noise. Opera stops. Static. Opera starts. Static. Bong. Cough. Static. Music and opera. Pause. Boing. Boing. Rustling paper. Long pause. Voices muffled by opera. Snoring. Singing. More singing. Louder. The finale is extremely loud. Unintelligible. Garble. Garble. Making noise. Noise and voices. Opera is drowning out the noises. Voice on the phone. Sounds of mouth from record. Hangs up. Dial tone. Beep. Silence. And the last piece. The short piece called The Plastic Cast by Hugo Vernier. A short piece of baloney. The Plastic Cast by Hugo Vernier is the masterpiece of the 21st century, a literary progenitor to such feats of conceptual writing as Day, rewriting Freud, and apostrophe. The Plastic Cast is the folkloric name for a single line in the deep web, the vast array of computers and networks that are not accessible through traditional searches. This innocuous sample of text has made elusive and supposed appearances embedded as dialogue or description within otherwise unrelated novels, such as Le Problème d'un Problème, in a network of lines that enlace, and on the use of mirrors in the game of chess. The Plastic Cast not only enables the archiving of all text generated online daily in a series of vast interlinked hard drives, it also archives that text in advance of the original publication date, effectively archiving the future. Vernier, as elusive as his apocryphal text generator, has released only a single statement publicly. My point is that I see the library not as a passive depository of books, but as a generative mass that alone is capable of writing the best works. Thank you so much, Al, and thank you all to the team here at the Kelly
Derek,
Writers at the Kelly Writers House.
That was wonderful. I will be able to convey some of the comments, but the comment stream in YouTube has just been excited and generative and tickled. I have a couple of questions of my own in response to the reading, and I'll convey a few. And I also want to make sure we reserve some time to talk about lens flare, for which I will do a screen share and we can look at a couple of pages. But first, let's talk about the secondary, the redaction of the Warhol. You described the Warhol as an unreadable novel, and then of course you've written a novel that could be called Unreadable Squared, I suppose.
Sure.
So let's talk about that. I guess, yeah, it was Susan Schultz, one of the many friends of yours who's, I assume you know Susan, who commented on, I'm paraphrasing, somewhat of a surprise to see how much sound and indeed music is in that novel. You kind of drew it out in a way. So can you talk about unreadability and describe what remains? What's the remnant of the Warhol after you've done your process? And
I think. Well, I mean, unreadability is. I mean, it's an easy catchphrase for difficult, strange, awkward, or overly long books that are tremendously boring, and that's kind of Warhol's. It's 400 pages of conversation that lead nowhere. It's fascinating to read as a capsule of how people talked in the art scene in the late 60s
Right.
in New York.
Right.
But like I said, there's no plot, there's no characters, there's no development. It's just this outpouring of inane conversation. So it has a terrible rep and has had so since its publication. Except it's a novel written, and both of those words are in quotation marks, by Andy Warhol. This is a very intriguing thing. He's just taken something and moved it over here.
Right.
So that book, what I did, when you look at the pages of my novel, they are primarily blank.
Right.
What is left is the punctuation marks, all the punctuation marks, and all the sound effect words, as I said. So the punctuation marks all stay to create that sense of the, as I said, to create that sense of the city streets, the grid. Punctuation marks are the traffic signs of literature. According to Adorno, there is no element in which language resembles music more than in the punctuation marks. So I've left all the punctuation marks, suggesting that, once again, the grid of the crosstown streets, as well as the sound effects, and all that music starts coming forward. My dream is to, at one point, sit in Union Square near Warhol's old factory and read the whole damn book out loud and record it within the sonic landscape
Right.
of the New York streets. And because it's not just traffic, it's traffic and conversations and dogs woofing in the background and music coming out of car stereos. It is a found orchestra. This is a sonic landscape. So what I wanted my novel to do is to foreground that music and foreground the sounds of the city itself humming behind our conversations.
Right. Yeah, that comes through for sure. So what would you, I'm going to press a question that was inside that question. What do you think remains? What is preserved? What is disclosed from the Warhol that we wouldn't see possibly because we'd be so overwhelmed by the pages?
Well, in this particular case, if you remove the dialogue, what's left is the interventions, the sonic interventions,
right,
of a series of young women.
Right.
The insertions by a series, as I said, a series of young high school students, included Mo Tucker. Mo Tucker, as a high school student, was involved in this and transcribing this. Mo Tucker goes on to be the drummer for the Velvet Underground, right, by coincidence. So what is left is the shape of the city and the interventions of young female voices in that space and how they heard the city itself.
Right. Right.
And so I
which says something very interesting about the factory, no? The sociality of the factory. You're drawing something out.
None of the young women who did the transcribing were involved with the factory. These were high school students.
Okay, right, I got it.
That just needed a part-time job. Yeah. The speakers who I've erased, Warhol doesn't exist in this book. The speakers, all of the denizens of the factory are gone. All that's left is the city and these young women.
Yeah. Wonderful. I want to ask you about the experimental autobiography, the experimental memoir. Yes. I wonder if first you would reread the most Steinian passage. There's so many Steinian passages in terms of rhythm. I heard the sounds of, for instance, the Picasso portrait in some of it. Would you read a couple of Steinian sentences?
Absolutely. That if I told him the completed portrait of Picasso, right, absolutely informs the sound right, of this particular section.
Right.
I remember something happening. Did it? Did something happen? I remember it. I remember it. Did it happen? Something happens. I remember it. It happened, and she remembers. He remembers. She remembers. She remembers. So does he. That section.
Perfect.
That rhythm is
right,
is an attempt to lift the rhythm straight out of it.
Yeah, and you did it beautifully. So here's my question. You mentioned in your introduction to that piece that it was personal, that it had to do with childhood, and you used the word trauma. And when you used the word trauma, I then listened carefully to see if I could pick up any kind of reference to a traumatic experience of the young person in the piece. And never mind whether I heard it. My question to you is a little bit of a setup, which is, how does choosing that mode, let's just say an untraditional way of telling the story of one's life, how does that mode perhaps convey or present or replicate the trauma perhaps more effectively than if you had written it straight?
Well, I think that constructing sentences like this that don't have a propulsion towards meaning or closure allows for that sense of uncertainty, that sense that we're not actually progressing past the traumatic moment, and that
yes,
and gets into that uncertainty of memory. That, just as I said here, the way something is seen or perceived within oneself is not necessarily the way it was,
right?
And it shifts back and forth. And I didn't want, just like I eliminated most. There are no names. It boils down to a minimal number of pronouns, so that the focus keeps shifting, and there isn't a tidiness. And because I don't think that memory nor trauma actually allow for that, and so to write in that towards a closure seems to me a bit of a fallacy.
sorry to simplify it a little, but I can't help myself. You're saying powerfully to me that if you went back to that scene, to those scenes, and presented them in a conventional, got it all worked out, now this is the way I look back at it, you would be dishonoring the messiness and chaos.
Absolutely.
And Stein helps you refine that, or to get back there, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, and reading Stein, I mean, so much of her work is notoriously coded. It's you'll have interventions of the language of the household, that the tone shifts up and down between what seems to be a propulsive narrative and these, moments of flipping the text back onto itself
Right.
as it kind of recharges and re-goes. And
Right.
that seems like a more accurate representation of memory, particularly family memory.
Absolutely. So Nasser Hussein follows up with a question. Is trauma, gee, it must be late where Nas is if he's in New York.
Yeah, he stayed up to compare beards.
Okay, good. He's comparing beards. I want to see his beard. Is trauma then the rejection of closure? Nas asks.
I think remaining in trauma is, and ideally healing brings that closure. But I don't know. I think that part of the fact that there is no closure is part of that traumatic moment.
Yeah. Nasser says pretty late. I'm guessing it's I had 6 hours at least. It's 2 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe 1 a.m. Rachel Blau Duplessis writes, the evocation of B.P. Nichol is so Whitman-like, like crossing Brooklyn Ferry. How do you reconcile, or not, this yearning with the conceptual work, like sending that box, the empty box, through UPS, about which Rachel writes, wow.
I think that conceptualism in a lot of ways has a reputation of being impersonal, of being cold, of not speaking to the individual, and I think that a lot of conceptual work actually belies that's not sustainable. A lot of conceptual writing, in my opinion, is intensely personal. It's just using a different toolbox to get to that statement.
Yeah,
a different set of poetic tools.
Yeah.
So I have no problems with seeing this here in the piece I read of Nichols. It's written from the viewpoint of the text itself. It is the book speaking, and I think that that's really interesting. That Whitmanic voice, that every man, I sing this song of myself and all of us, that gets. This is from the viewpoint of the text. It is sitting there waiting for us. It only comes alive when engaged with the crowd.
Well, sure, but now that B.P. Nichol is gone, that's where we find him. So it's not only the book that's speaking; it's B.P. You turn the pages, and I am here. You turn the pages, and I am here. Where else are we going to find it, right?
I think that in a lot of cases, as a writer, that's where he always was.
Right.
Barry Nichol had his life, but the author was only ever in his pages, right? Those are two different things. The man, the husband, the father, that's not there.
Right.
That's his life, and that the role of the text, that is where we find the author. The author and the person can separate.
Yeah. This one comes, given the course of our conversation, this is a more general question, but still relevant. It was posed by Ron Silliman at the beginning of the reading, wondering if you would be willing to talk about whether there's a specifically Canadian mode of conceptualism. And he adds, good to see you looking so good.
Thanks, Ron. I don't know that there's a particularly Canadian form. There are a lot of Canadians practicing conceptualism, applying those tools. Darren Werschler, Christian Book, Nos in the UK. But I don't know that there is necessarily a Canadian conceptualism. If there is, I would say that it maybe is less overtly political than some of my American colleagues. but I don't see it as a reflecting a nationalistic point. I see it as more of an international conversation that, the conceptual writing I see coming out of Sweden or Norway or France, let alone, the States and Canada, it creates a network of conversations.
A lot of our audience were interested in the return again and again in this reading of Apollinaire. You, in your Apollinaire piece, his writing, quote, his writing moves poetry to gallery walls. Now that, it strikes me, Derek is talking there too. That's something you care a lot about. So I'm inviting you to say something about how important it is to you as an arts community person, as an inter-arts person, and now as an arts administrator, for the sibling arts, the sister and brother arts, to move poetry, for instance, to gallery walls. This is something you care about, the visuality of poetry, and so on.
Absolutely.
So this is like an open-ended question for you.
I can answer that a couple different ways. I do think that I think it is a very generative challenge for poets and writers to engage with other art forms. I think we've got a big cultural blind spot if we're not talking to dancers and painters and sculptors and musicians as ways of challenging what our assumptions are around what poetry can do and where it can function. My own visual poetry, which I didn't perform any of this evening, as I don't tend to perform it. I don't see it as a score for my own performance. Right. Works. I've had a number of people ask, how do you read this? And what changes when you move it from a book to a wall? What's the difference between having it in a collection of poetry or hanging it in a gallery exhibit? And I laugh that, in both cases, it takes about the same amount of time to absorb. But if it's in a book, we question how it reads. And if it's hanging on a gallery wall, we question how it looks. We tend to look at things on a wall and read things in a book. And that, I enjoy that kind of fluctuating moment for visual poetry, because it brings poetry towards a conversation of how we engage with texts all the time, outside of the literary. So whether that be signposts or storefronts or your cell phone or, all these things, this is all text that we look at, but we don't read a walk or don't walk sign. We look at it, but it's still information. And I get really excited about the idea of shifting poetry, not to the exclusion of other forms, but trying to react and respond and engage with all these other forms of reading, all these other forms of text that are seen as apoetic. What if we bring them in and start, because we know how to read the widgets on our laptops, apply that same type of thinking to poetry and allow something to be, as I said, like the Apple logo or the Nike swoosh, and see those as poetic moments as well. They take the signs and they create an emotive response.
Derek, this is a lightning round moment, so I'm just going to shoot at you some comments that have been made, and you can respond to any or none, or just smile at them. Nick Montfort has said some typically characteristically clever things. One is when he heard that you were going to read from a novel, he wrote to the pals in the chat, the audience, talking about you while you were reading. It's funny mode, it's not like a reading room where they're all looking at you and they wouldn't dare talk to each other. He writes, maybe he heard it as a novel, like EH, novel, a?
Yeah, it's a Canadian novel. A novel? Yeah.
I thought you'd like that. Nasser follows up, and I'll just read the question. You can answer it in a second if you want. Sure. What changes when you project it on a big tower? That was in response to the discussion about his writing moves poetry to gallery walls. And then Rachel follows up on the conversation we were having about my question about conveying trauma in an, she's responding to the discussion of BP. You turn the pages and I am here. And she writes, true, probably responding to what I said, but it is also from the voice of the posthumous author. I agree, but it is, yes, the book, but look for me under your footsteps, Bootsoles approximately. Anyway,
Yeah, in both of
respond to
those
any of that?
cases, both of those questions engage with poetry in a public sphere. So Noss is alluding to the fact that one of my visual poems called Prose of the Trans-Canada was projected on the side of the Calgary Tower, this big concrete modernist tower in the middle of Calgary, Alberta. And my joke is basically, if you project poetry into a public space like that on the side of a tower, it just makes it easier to ignore. And you know, you still need people to look up and engage. What Rachel also alludes to, and what you just said with look under your feet, is not only, you know, look at the sounds of the city, but also in BP Nichol's case, the piece that is literally on the cover of Nights on Prose Mountain, Lake Line Lone, that is a rubbing, a chalk rubbing of the engraving of a piece from BP's fiction, which is carved directly into the street, right into the asphalt, the concrete of BP Nichol Lane, which is the laneway behind Coach House Books, the publisher of this book. So if you seek him, look under your feet. Look at BP Nichol Lane.
I love it.
Find his work there.
I love that. In a minute, we're going to turn to lens flare, but before that, I wanted another lightning round. What I'd like you to do is rapid fire as you can at the end of a long day.
Yeah.
Just start to name the artists, the people who are important to you, historically, contemporarily. Just name a few. We are going to know that this isn't complete. People who don't get mentioned are not going to be mad because you're riffing. Who are the important figures for you right now?
I mean, historically, you're looking at people like Nichol and Stein, which I brought up, John Riddell, even Burroughs in the sense of the cut up, the Dadas, and the certainly Russian constructivism for my visual work. Contemporary colleagues whose work I really admire. I'm really honored that Nasser Hussain could be here. His work, Skywritings, is fantastic, as is Canadian poet Helen Hynotsky's work, Ken Hunt, Lisa Robertson. There is an incredibly Christian book, Kenneth Goldsmith. There's an incredibly strong contemporary avant-garde scene in Canada. I have some exceptional colleagues like Anthony Atherin, Simon Morris, Nick Thurston in the UK, and Peter Yeager, who are all doing work that really challenges what's going on in the UK. I think that there is a huge international conversation of what is the potential of text. It's happening constantly.
That's great. That was a brave and beautiful answer. But now go way back. Tell us a couple of names that we would never have guessed have influenced you. Maybe something, you know, that you read when you were a student. It may be you're just grooving on a writer we wouldn't expect, or an artist.
Well, I don't know if you'd expect this or not, but certainly one of the authors whose work continues to blow me away, shock me, that I've been reading for years is Reznikov.
Yeah, which Reznikov is special?
Testimony, but Testimony and Holocaust are right. Such. These are, if they happened today, they would be considered conceptualist writing. This is text that, you know, takes found text, moves them over here, and is incredibly heartbreaking, incredibly beautiful, succinct modernist texts that are entirely found. And Reznikov's writing continues to
I'm guessing you would sign us up. We should be reading more Reznikov. He should be better known, taught more often.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to screen share, and we're going to look at a few images from the new book, Lens Flare, to be published by Gimo Press, you said in January.
Yes.
And is Gimo Press, is it easy to purchase the book directly from them, or is it done through?
It's not available for pre-order yet, but it will be shortly, and in the next couple months. And they do have a website. It should be relatively easy to find. So
excellent. I'm going to try to make this PDF bigger. I don't know if I've succeeded. Let's see. Yep. So stop me when you want to pause on some image or a page.
Sure.
Maybe you
Pick,
want to explain that this is a page for page
yeah.
redo.
So how about this one?
Yeah.
So these 2 pages. A couple years ago, Anthony Atherin and Clara Daenerys Press, Penteract Press, published a book of visual poems of mine, Dayglow visual poems, called Aperture. And this 2-page spread, on the left, there is a green text on a pink background, and on the right, there is a pink text on a green background. That would be the original text found inside of Aperture. Those were originally black letter-set poems created out of crumbling, barely functional scraps of letters from sheets of letter-set, which Anthony and Clara then recolored at my request into gaudy and eye-shocking colors. That was published a couple years ago, as I said, in the UK. I then fed these texts to these images to a colleague of mine in Calgary named Rhys Farrell. Rhys is a graffiti artist and muralist that works also in shockingly beautiful geometrics. Gave him the whole text and basically let him loose and said, do anything you want on every page. And what Rhys has created here is a series of sweeping gestures that suggest the swath of a spray can or the geometrics. The idea is to get this moving towards shifting that farther and farther from a poetic understanding into a visual one. I wanted to see the murals of streetscapes. I wanted to see 1970s wallpaper, and see how these texts, as minimal as they are, can start echoing what we see on our streets even more. And to me, poetry is always a collaborative act, whether it be the design of a book, the editing. But I take a lot of solace in what Canadian poet Margaret Avison said, that the best response to a poem is another poem.
Mm.
And that, to me, that's the exciting thing, is where a text can go out into the world and then come back in a form that challenges me, that makes its own writing unrecognizable and surprising. That's what I want in poetry. I joke that it's like a college student going off to college, dyeing their hair, getting something pierced, dating, well or poorly, and then coming home, and you have to rediscover who this person is. And they usually come back a lot more interesting than they left. And that's what I want for writing.
Right.
That's what I'm asking for, is that collaborative act. Go out into the world, meet people, change, transform, and then come home. And this new book will be a documentation of that going off to college.
What you're saying, Derek, is, I find quite moving, is counterintuitive, and so you, in your arts community, activist, organizing, gathering, collaborating self, which is the intuitive response to intertextuality and artists responding to artists. You said the most generous thing you could do is respond to a poem responding to a poem, and the general take on that is, oh, how navel-gazy and how internal and how hermetic and how non-generous that is. But in fact, you've shown, and others, but tonight is your night, you've shown that is a kind of sociality that is collaborative and generous and winds up making more rather than less. It widens rather than narrows, which is why you riffed and went to the idea of being young and, breaking out, trying something wild and new.
I don't understand poets who want to restrain their work, hold it back from a conversation. I put everything that I write up on my website as free downloadable PDFs, full text, because I want there to be a conversation. I think that I became a poet because I want to talk to people. I want to talk to other poets. I want to, have these conversations, and allowing text to circulate out of control, just put it there and see what happens, as
Right.
opposed to having to be asked, allows for surprise. It allows for unexpected encounters. And I can't think of anything. It's like getting a fan letter. Who wouldn't want a letter back saying, I read your book and it
Yeah.
inspired me to write?
Yeah.
What could be better than that?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I believe that writing comes from reading. Writing comes from engaging with other people's work. Make
And
your work accessible.
what's special about you is that, yes, we do this through, the interwebs. You will share that way, of course. But you're also one of the few people who thinks about doing a small letterpress thing of the work of someone you admire and putting it out on paper in a small run. And you see that as putting the word out as well, which is a very, both an old fashioned and extremely new and radical idea. I just wanted to say thank you for this. This has been great. The audience has been great. We've had a nice number of people, among them Nasser Hussain, Susan Schultz, Lorianne Fuhrer, Ron Silliman, Joe Maludis, Rachel, Nick Montfort. We have Sarah Hernandez of ModPo tuning in from Madrid. I want to give you a final word or a final thought before I do some thanks to the staff.
Well, thank you all so much. Al alluded to my small press publishing. I would end with asking poets to publish their own work, to publish other people's work, to create small presses, print stuff up, hand it out, create community, ask for engagement, and that the more we circulate our work, the more we normalize poetry, the more that we allow poetry to be part of our discourse, and the greater an appreciation and conversation that we can have, and that I think we're stronger sharing, and there is always time and space and opportunity for generosity.
Thank you, Derek. And thank you for the work you're doing at Banff. I know this is a very, very, very difficult time, not just for you, but for any arts center. But the best wishes for a receding of COVID sufficient to be able to allow you to bring people back to the site, which is a pretty amazing place. And I would recommend to everybody, you're going to have to do the URL for me, but to anybody watching who doesn't know about the Banff Center, to go and take a look and anticipate some kind of visit to it. What's the best URL web address for that?
banffcenter.ca. Right now we are doing programming online, but we anticipate soon we will be able to welcome people back to campus, and that will open up the arts back here on the side of Sleeping Buffalo to guests from around the world, and gives me an opportunity to work in a beehive once again.
Yeah, I can't wait till I get back there myself. I wanted to thank Anthony Lagana and Rachel Dennis of the Writers House staff who have helped work with the audience and their comments, and Nick Seymour, who has managed the tech along with Zach Gardner, but mostly Nick tonight. Nick's done a fantastic job. Many thanks to the Kelly Writers House for hosting this event, and to ModPo and all the ModPo people who have been tuning in tonight. Derek, once again, thank you. Derek Day now concludes, and I'm really grateful for the time you spent today. Hours and hours. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Al. I love the opportunity, and I'm so glad that we had a chance to do this together. I hope everyone out there is safe and healthy. Please keep your distance, and let's beat this. And I will see you all soon in person.
Thank you. Bye-bye.